Welcome back to Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises in my hotel room in New Orleans. We are doing a Sugar Bowl preview show. We're doing 3 Kings. Is it King of the Norths? Kings of the North? It's like attorneys general. 3 Kings of the Northuses today. We're doing this Sugar Bowl preview right now. Landis is going to be along shortly. We'll have the big game breakdown. We'll make our picks for Georgia Notre Dame. Then at 2 Eastern, live from the Rose Bowl, Landis will join us, and we will do a live Ohio State, Oregon Rose Bowl preview and picks, and we'll talk a little bit about Texas, Arizona State. But we're almost not pretending that's not. We're pretending that's not a game. And we just got done with the coaches' news conference. I want to bring you the energy of this. I think maybe, and also, by the way, I'm in my room. All I had to do. Let me ask this off the top: hotel rooms, when they have the hard tuck in the bed. Do you like the hard tuck like you're a baby in a blanket or you're a caterpillar in a cocoon? Or do you immediately have to pull the sheets out from the bottom of the bed because it feels like you're in a coffin and you're being smothered? That's how I feel. I can't sleep. I can't be in the bed hotel coffin. But I'm nervous back here. Oh, pro hard tuck from Christopher P. I mean, this is like an off-season show. This is a 45-minute off-season show. Hard tuck, soft tuck. Where are you? Steven, the first thing you do, you get in the hotel room, you pull it out. My God, let me live. I have to live. Oh my God, I'm shouting. I want to be swaddled like I'm 4 months old, says Christopher. I got my 2 swords. I told my daughter I used her swords. I can scream. Are you a screaming kind of show? No, we're not a screaming show. We were a whisper show yesterday. It almost killed me. Now, let me show you something. All right, we're going to get to the Sugar Bowl preview right now, but hold on a second. I'm just going to, if you're watching on YouTube, that's it right there. I'm on the 42nd floor, and that's New Orleans. Here's why I'm fired up. I think tomorrow might be the greatest day in college football history, maybe. Now, I didn't research it. I'm going to go back after the fact, after we see what happens with 3 games tomorrow and try to find, make comparisons. But I still don't think we're ready for how good this is going to be. I don't think we're ready for how awesome. The quarterfinals are the best because everybody came away, a lot of people came away from round 1. I think you should have come away from it with, it's better than the alternative in a lot of ways, but the games maybe weren't super competitive, not as much as people wanted. These are 8 really good teams that are left. It's 6 really good teams and 2 interesting underdogs that I think will have a chance to compete better than SMU and Indiana did, although I do have questions about Boise State. But we've never done this, and we're about to do it together. And I'm super fired up about it. And so I think we're on the precipice of something. And so I hope everybody's feeling that energy. But to have 3 games, bang, 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 this competitive, historic programs that matter this much, man, I think we're on the edge of something, brothers and sisters. I can't. This is the new world, and we're really going to feel it tomorrow. So we want to do everything to get you ready. That means 3 shows today. Sugar Bowl preview right now. Rose Bowl preview live 2 Eastern on YouTube. After the Boise State, Penn State game tonight, live. We'll be back live. Tomorrow on Wednesday, January 1st, nothing during the day because we're not going to be hey, I actually could do that. Skip the Texas, Arizona State game and just hang out with the North. Go ahead and watch it. You're allowed to watch it. And then we're going to do it live at the end of the day. I'll be in the Superdome. Landis will be in his hotel room, but we'll do all 3 games. So we'll have 2 post-game shows. So here's where I want to start. I'm curious about going into these quarterfinals. There are 2 teams that are the gauge for this because there was talk with Marcus Freeman and Kirby Smart, who just got done talking about 45 minutes ago. There's another thing. I grabbed Marcus as he was walking off, and I want to talk about a little bit. But the idea that Notre Dame, right, the situation that Notre Dame has agreed to and that everybody has agreed to together is that Notre Dame can't get a bye because they are not in a conference. So they can't have a first-round bye. But Marcus Freeman said conference championship weekend, they treat it as their bye. right? And Kirby Smart was asked which is better, which is more advantageous. He said, well, we'll see who wins, and that'll be what people will take and run. The two teams that I'm most curious about are Penn State and Texas, because they're the two teams that are playing an extra game in this scenario. Because Georgia and Oregon played in the conference championship games, Boise State, Arizona State, they played in the conference championship games and won and earned the bye. Ohio State didn't play in that game. Tennessee didn't play in that game. Notre Dame didn't play in a game like that. Like SMU did, but they already lost. So like the teams that are left, the extra game here for Penn State and Texas, does it show up at all? Does it show up at all? I don't know. Maybe it does, but that's a little bit what I'm on the lookout for on these two games, on these four games, the Texas game and the Penn State game. Does it show up at all that they're like slightly more worn down than Arizona State and Boise State? I don't know. I don't think it's going to be that necessarily, but I'm on alert for it. Okay. Landis, we pre-recorded our big game breakdown that's coming up in a moment. But in that, Landis was asking me, because I'm here in New Orleans and I should know these things, like how's Jeremiah Love, the running back? The great running back for Notre Dame, who had like a 90-yard run, but then didn't do much otherwise against Indiana. So I made sure to ask Marcus Freeman about that today. Also, you got to get up there, you get the microphone, and you say, Kings of the North, Doug Lesmerises, Kings of the North, and everybody goes, like when I checked in here, I said, can I get my credential for Doug Lesmerises, Kings of the North? And the woman said, what is that? We get a lot of what is that with Kings of the North, but we got to spread the word. So I asked Marcus about the two running back rotation with Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price and how they are. What's their health? What's their freshness level right now? He did say last week Jeremiah Love was feeling a little bit, right? So like this is like, or that he was feeling a little bit after USC, but he said like he's as healthy as he's going to be now. So they want to have a two-back system. He said, obviously Georgia has it as well with Frazier and ETN. Ohio State has it. Penn State has it. So many teams have this now. Oregon has it to a large degree with Jordan James and Noah Whittington. Like this is just what you do. You have two backs now. But some, not concern, but curiosity about whether Jeremiah Love is all the way there, I think is reasonable. So, but I don't think it's enough that it's going to be a factor in the game. Landis is a little worried about it in the preview, what you'll see in a second, but I don't think it's going to be a huge deal. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to run my conversation with Pete Samson, a great Notre Dame beat writer, just to give you a little more vibes, hot off the news conferences. I just talked to Pete downstairs. We'll run that. I'll come back. I'll tell you Marcus Freeman's story about New Orleans, and then we'll do our big game breakdown. But first, Pete Samson. Mike, we're good. Pete Samson, kind enough to give us some time from The Athletic to talk about this Sugar Bowl and the present and future of the Fighting Irish. Now on KOTN by Pete Samson of The Athletic. How long you been covering Notre Dame football?
24 years. So a minute.
24 years. Yeah, that's about how long I've been doing it too. So this is a thing you just said off camera is like the most interesting thing to me, which is the idea of maybe at times in the past, Notre Dame would get to a spot like this and be like, hey, Notre Dame, but I don't really know. But maybe this feels different to you?
It does. Some of that is the field has come back to Notre Dame. You think about the teams Notre Dame has been blown out by, whether it be freshman year Trevor Lawrence, 2020 Alabama was an all-time great team. I mean, even I've been doing this long enough. The last Sugar Bowl Notre Dame was in, I covered. That was the first Sugar Bowl here after Katrina against LSU, and it was Jamarcus Russell. And you're just like, they keep running into that team, and Georgia isn't that team. So Notre Dame has been building to this, but I think part of the reason they have a good chance on Wednesday night is like the field has come back to them a little bit, and there's not like an all-time great team out there waiting for them.
We've been talking all year about the way Notre Dame has overcome these injuries, and that to me, especially with some of the young guys that have stepped up, that Leonard Moore is a true freshman, Anthony Knapp is a true freshman. Is there a better depth of talent at Notre Dame that I think we certainly on KOTN agree with you. The field has come back, right? But has the talent level at Notre Dame, or maybe the depth of talent, come up a little bit?
It has. I don't know if that makes the difference on Wednesday in the sense of like you're still starting a true freshman left tackle, a true freshman corner. You have to juggle your rotation of defensive tackle now with Riley Mills out. But in the past, I think back to the 2018 game against Clemson, they lose Julian Love, their starting corner, for a quarter. the entire game falls apart. Like they're done at halftime. And like to see them go through with the season without Benjamin Morrison, their star corner this year, and still finish number one in the country in pass efficiency defense. Like, I don't think there's any doubt the depth of talent is better. Because at Notre Dame, there's no way they would have gone 11-1 if it wasn't.
Yeah. Marcus Freeman, we just got done with the coaches' news conference here. Marcus is very professional about all this stuff, but he was saying it's not that Notre Dame thinks we want to chase a national championship. It's they're obsessed with the idea of reaching their potential, which, I mean, if you want to be cynical about it, is like, man, that's a heck of a way to say, like, don't be mad if we don't win the national championship. But like, I don't think he means it that way. But then I guess I would ask you, in this modern era, is Notre Dame's maximum potential winning a national championship, or is it honestly still a little short of that at the moment?
I think it depends on the year. I don't think Notre Dame as a program is built like Georgia or Ohio State, where every year you're expected to go on to the semis at least. Notre Dame is built to make a legit run probably every couple years. But this is one of those years. So that I think why when he says potentially, it does feel like couching, hey, we lost on Wednesday 21-20, but like we reached our full potential. I think the full potential of this team, especially if they were totally healthy, is this team could make a run to the very end. As they're currently comprised, maybe not, but like Georgia's not going to cry for you. They lost their starting quarterback. So I think this is a team, if Notre Dame is built to make a run in a title every 3 or so years, this is one of the years they were built to do it.
Impressed with the way Notre Dame's handled the offensive line injuries. This is the fourth defensive starter, though, lost to injury. Is it possible that Riley Mills is the bridge too far? Like they've managed everything else, but like this is the one. Because I'll say later in the show, a little bit of it is like, well, they didn't have Howard Cross for like 3.5 games. Now he's back, and now you lose Mills, but there's some guys who maybe had to play while Cross was out who are just going to keep playing. So it's a little bit of a trade, but it's still a huge loss. Is this maybe how tough do you think Riley Mills is to overcome?
Brutal. They might not. Like I've been using the phrase "bridge too far" a lot this season because
I probably stole it from you.
Yeah, I thought like Benjamin Morrison was a bridge too far. You lose an All-American corner, like, well, how are you going to keep playing? Well, they just put in a freshman. It's totally fine. But you can hide outside the hash marks. You cannot hide in the A gap, and I think that's where I've. And it's not that like Notre Dame won't be able to hold up tomorrow night in the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter. It's the fourth quarter when you're just like, we have to rotate here, and we're putting in a guy that like Armel Mukum and Sean Sevillano are their new backup defensive tackles. They played a total of 0 snaps against A&M, 0 snaps against Louisville, 0 snaps against USC. So that tells you how much the coaches think of them as like, this is a guy we can trust in a big moment. I don't know what choice they have tomorrow or on Wednesday other than to trust them. And like, can you steal enough snaps when they're in the game without Riley Mills? Like Gabe Rubio steps in the starting lineup, good player, 6'5", 310, like what you would want a defensive tackle to look like. Howard Cross is an All-American level player. It's the next group after that I'm most concerned about. I think their starters will hold up as long as they don't have to play them 65, 75 snaps. And then like when they're not in, are you able to manage that part of the game without, Georgia just gashing you up the middle for a series and, suddenly you're down 10-3 because you had to rotate and like that was the touchdown drive you gave up.
Landis is worried about that. You'll find out about that in a minute. Last thing here, like big picture. So you said this is kind of a peak year for Notre Dame, but this point in the Marcus Freeman era, we got super excited about CJ Carr in the spring game. We might have gotten out over our skis about that a little bit, but like just where they are, do you expect Notre Dame will be a regular participant in the 12-team playoff? And how much more do you think there is for Notre Dame? This is a peak year, but what would it look like if Notre Dame is even better than this year's team in the near future?
Well, I mean, CJ Carr is, I think there's still reason to be excited about him for the long term. I think, next year they lose, you lose Cross, Mills, Morrison, Xavier Watts, they're All-American safety. So the defense rebuilds a little bit next year. The offensive line really could return its starting lineup next year and the year after that with CJ Carr as a junior. So I think like next year they're managing the portal pretty well so far with 3 incoming guys as is. They need to do something at defensive tackle. But to me, it's like this was definitely a playoff team or bust. They made it. this is a successful season, certainly if they win on Wednesday. Next year, maybe you make it, maybe you don't. But 2026, that's, to me, I look at it, it's like, that's another one of those years where you're built to make a run. So maybe they take a half step back next year, but then in 2026, like the way the program is set up at that point, that's another like make a run at the whole thing type of year for Notre Dame.
And if people are watching this and saying like, man, this guy's covered the team for 24 years, he's so smart. Pete, where can they find you?
I'm at The Athletic, so you can subscribe to The Athletic. You know many of my former and current colleagues there. So yeah, I've been covering Notre Dame for 24 years across multiple platforms, but The Athletic since 2018.
All right. He's Pete Samson. We'll be right back on Kings of the North.
We're actually here right now. So listen, I mean, I bring the props. If I'm going to bring them, I got to use them. I hung up my Notre Dame banner. Couple New Orleans stories. So listen. So as you guys know, God, I'm fired up this morning. I'm so happy to shout. I didn't realize. Also, my daughter messaged me and said, what is this? We're all people mumbo jumbo. She did not like the cramometer yesterday. So maybe it's the shouting that makes me cram it to people. I don't know. Maybe if I whisper, I can't cram in a whisper. Is that possible? Is it not physically? Like it's one of those things you can't keep your eyes open when you sneeze. You can't cram it while you're whispering. So we made the cramometer like an 11 because I acted like I was in a library yesterday. Are you a shouting show? No. Not us. We don't shout. New Orleans. Marcus Freeman was asked about this being in New Orleans, 2007. Oh, I wanted to show you guys the city, and now the sun's coming in. Hold on a second. Whoop. Okay, shut the doors. 2007, Marcus Freeman was here as a player with Ohio State, and they lost the national title game to LSU. And he said, like, the most frustrating thing about that was that they felt like they didn't achieve their dreams and their goals as a team. And, you have your own individual accolades. And I think, like, again, we talked about it with Pete, the idea that Marcus Freeman is saying, like, it's not about chasing a thing. It's about maximizing who you are. I think, he still carries that sticks to you. I mean, I those are my second and third years covering Ohio State. And I was very much in a world of how can you be angry as a fan base that, oh no, we're the second best team in the country, right? An amazing accomplishment in a lot of ways, frustrating, but still great stuff. But when you lived it, Marcus Freeman was part of that, it does stick with you. And so I think Ohio State in that era felt like going into the national title games in 06 and 07 against two SEC teams. That's the beginning of this. When we do the narrative podcast, how this turned toward the South and then now is turning back, right? It turned toward the South in 06 and 07. When Ohio State lost to Florida and lost to LSU. That was the beginning of all of this. And they felt like they didn't necessarily maximize it. So that's in his head being here in New Orleans. And then the result is we just want to maximize who we are as a team. He wants Notre Dame to maximize who they are. And the question is, what is their maximum? Is their maximum beating this Georgia team? I think it is. Now, I'm not going to come on here and rip Notre Dame necessarily if they don't beat Georgia, but I don't think there's anything here that says their best is not good enough. There's a lot of times when you come into games like this and you say one team has to be more than itself. And I'm stealing what I already said in the big game breakdown, but I don't think that's the case here. And then the other thing is just like, this is my old guy stuff. It still blows. Someday this is just going to be real. It's going to be like, oh, Doug's bald cap is very realistic. Like, that's not a cap. So I covered Marcus as a player, and now here he is as the coach of Notre Dame. Talking about, he talked about LSU's defensive line. I can't believe he didn't say the name Ricky Jean-Francois. That is like for the North, it's like Ricky Jean-Francois in that game on the LSU defensive line, destroyed Ohio State along with Glenn Dorsey in that game. But Marcus was like bringing up Jim Tressel and a lot of stuff here. And there's like a really good Northern lineage here. And it's just one of these Becky's in the comments and saying, got a big kick out of Iowa State beating Miami, thought of this show. That's how we want you to think. And I hope there's some Northern pride bubbling up here. Maybe you're an Ohio State fan. Maybe you're a Michigan fan. Maybe you're an Oregon fan. But I think there's a real reason this is the game we need to root for the North. We need to root for Notre Dame here because there's a lot of, especially for Ohio State fans, there might be, there's been some stuff that as a head coach of Notre Dame and a former Ohio State player, you have to say some things. Maybe it was indelicate at times. times the way Marcus sort of praised Notre Dame and like it came out in a way that was like maybe not anti-Ohio State, but ruffled the feathers of Ohio State fans. This is a Jim Tressel legacy here. This is a Northern legacy. There's a lot of things. Marcus Freeman now at Notre Dame does a thing where he has a head coach of the week among his assistant coaches. And he says he got that from Jim Tressel. That he remembers as a player, Tressel having an opponent expert each week. There's an assistant coach who is in charge of really understanding the opponent, and then they would speak to the team. And Marcus, as a player, thought, hey, I'm getting to hear and understand the excellence and expertise of an assistant coach that maybe I don't interact with a lot. So he wanted to bring that to Notre Dame. There's a lot of Tressel DNA here. There's a lot of honest Northern DNA here. So you think about, like, that's... And I think like Ryan Day has brought in some of that Tressel stuff this year as well. So it's just a reminder that like there's connections. This is what we believe in the North, that we are really connected, maybe in more ways than we think. And this is an opportunity for everybody in the North to get behind Notre Dame. So then the other thing I asked Marcus about is the story they told. There were 5 seniors who could have gone to the NFL. It's very similar to this Ohio State team, to like Michigan last year. You keep guys, and it really matters. After losing in 06 and 07, guys who really mattered, who started on that team, who stayed for 08. Marcus Freeman was one of them. James Laurinaitis, Malcolm Jenkins, a couple of the other guys. And I grabbed Marcus. It's like when I see Marcus Freeman, and just because I covered him when he was a kid, I feel like I can just interrupt him and grab him when he's trying to go do his job. And he's like, Doug, leave me alone. And I said, I'm surprised you didn't talk about the story was that Ohio State guys, after the loss to LSU, like after the game, like in the shower, in the locker room after the game, were like, we're coming back. And I was like, Marcus, remember in New Orleans, what you guys decided was like, you're in the locker room in the shower saying that we're coming back. And he's like, I don't know if we decided it then. He was like, is that what we told you guys? It's like, okay, I see how it is now. So anyway, it's kind of crazy. Notre Dame is in this situation, and they have a huge opportunity. And I think they're ready for it. They're injured, but so is Georgia. But I think otherwise Notre Dame is ready for it. So let's get down to the breakdown. Bill Landis and I, the big game breakdown on the Fighting Irish and the Georgia Bulldogs in the Sugar Bowl, coming up next on KOTN. Time now for a big game breakdown. Landis, let's do Notre Dame, Georgia now. I'm doing both sides of this because I'm here.
Yeah.
And then the show this afternoon, you're going to do both sides of Oregon, Ohio State, because you're there. So it's not the normal where we cross over. So we are going to make picks at the end. This is, of course, the later game on New Year's Day. We're going to start with the Notre Dame offense against the Georgia defense. Just let me throw this out. I'm just asking. Is the Georgia defense mid?
I think it's better than mid.
Okay. Can I throw some stats at you? I just like to find stats because you're fancy stats and I like to be regular stats.
Mm-hmm.
EPA per play, which is like some measurement of like, hey, how good do you do play to play, right? Georgia's defense, EPA per play, 2021 first. Of course they were. They're like the generational defense first. 2022, 12th, still very good, but that was a more offensive-led Georgia national title team.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, 30th, still pretty good. This year, 55th. Do you want to change your mind on whether they're mid or not?
I guess
you don't want to change it?
How many teams are there in college football?
134.
They're a smidge better than mid.
They're in the mid range. Against the run, they're 51st. On dropbacks, they're 52nd. Like they're just in the 50s. And again, I just want one of the main things. We don't cover this team every day. I just really want Northern fans to understand this, that the fearsome, mighty Georgia defense is not what you remember from 2021. It doesn't mean they're bad. but is nothing. I don't think it's anything to be afraid of. Of course, they have individual amazing defenders. Malachi Starks is great on the back end. Jalen Walker will get after you. He's as good as any defensive player in the country. They're not as, I think, like rock solid up the middle as they are at times. And this is a team that in 2021 won with defense, and in 2022 won with offense, and they're not as good on either side of the ball as those teams. But particularly, I want to start there. They have a couple, I think they have like maybe 4, maybe 5 like excellent dudes. I also think they have a couple holes. I think their second corner spot, I think Dan Jackson at safety is vulnerable. It's not 1 through 11 NFL guys. And part of this, Landis, is if you watch look at the Georgia Tech game, that score got crazy because it went into a million overtimes. But Haynes King kind of did some stuff against Georgia. And I think if Haynes King could do it, Riley Leonard can do it.
That's what I was alluding to when we were talking about this on what day of the week is it? Monday, on Monday's show, when I said there was a game I had in mind when I was thinking about Notre Dame's offense against Georgia, because I remember it was I must have been the post game. It was either post game or the halftime interview with Kirby Smart, where he was like, they were doing some triple option stuff with their quarterback and we weren't ready for it.
Yeah.
Like, okay. So like, I guess there's two sides to that. Right? I was like, okay, is that a vulnerability that was exposed in Georgia's defensive scheme, or is it now that they saw it, they're going to be ready for it the next time around? Like, you could go either way on that. But Haynes King, I think, had 101 designed rushing yards in that game. Very athletic quarterback, and borderline physically unable to throw in that game too. By the way,
yes.
So like they knew it was coming. Georgia Tech was rotating quarterbacks because its starter couldn't throw the ball physically. Riley Leonard can, so you still need to respect that a little bit if you're defending Notre Dame, but he's just as athletic, if not more athletic, and elusive and powerful when he runs. So yeah, there's a blueprint there, I think, that Notre Dame can try to emulate if it looks at that Georgia Tech-Georgia game.
I think this game's going to be played in a phone booth a little bit, but I think Notre Dame might be more comfortable in that phone booth, given the machinations of everything that's happening on both sides of the ball. And that I don't think Notre Dame offensively has to do anything different than what they've done all year, which is run Riley Leonard, run Jeremiah Smith and Jadarian Price. They probably have to get Mitchell Evans a little more involved, the tight end has not had a huge year, but is a supremely talented guy. This would be a great opportunity for him to jump up. And then, I did talk to Jordan Faison. Like I do think, that's my guy. He had by far his best game of the season against Indiana, but I think maybe they found something there a little bit too, that what doesn't have to be a one-time thing. And so Mike Denbrock's got to get in his bag a little bit, but like, I think there have been times that if you got in a phone booth with Georgia, you'd come out missing a limb, right? That like, you can't play that way. Like when we talked about 2 years ago, or like, when, the times when we sort of were anticipating and then finally got that Ohio State passing attack against that Georgia defense. We thought maybe you'd get it in 2020, you got it in 2022. It was always like, you can't go through Georgia. The only thing you could do is go over them. I don't think that's true right now.
My lean is that it's not true, but I've also seen Georgia's defense put like Texas's rushing attack in a swirly for 2 games, right?
I do.
Texas had fewer than 60 rushing yards in both those games. Is that right?
But I think the Notre Dame rushing attack is better.
I think it's substantially better. Yeah. But it's hard. But
I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying.
Maybe we have better perspective on it because like we've watched Notre Dame all year. I only mention that because like I've heard some of that being talked about in anticipation of this game. It's like, yeah, Notre Dame runs the ball really well, but Georgia shut down Texas's rushing attack, which I think hits people a certain way right now because they just saw what Texas did running the ball against Clemson, even though you and I pointed out after that game that Clemson has the worst rushing defense in the playoff and just had a bad rushing defense all year. Like Texas kind of should have done that to Clemson, right? So I'm trying to remove that from my head. But the struggle with me is that I do think what we've seen Georgia do in both of its games against Texas does reveal a bit of a ceiling for Georgia's defense that, if it hits right, is worrisome for anybody. Notre Dame, I think whoever Georgia's playing, there's a level that the Bulldogs, I think, can get to defensively that would make them very tough to beat in this playoff. And I'm like, part of me is worried might be the right word, but I'm curious if they can get there.
Curious. Yeah. But what what did Texas do, and what did people think Texas should do when they couldn't do anything against Georgia? Is put in the quarterback who can run.
Right.
So part of their issue is that their quarterback's not involved in the run game at all. And then Georgia ate you up. This is all Riley Leonard's going to be involved in the run game on scrambles and in design runs like all day.
Yes.
That's all this is going to be. And Riley Leonard has not thrown for more than 229 yards in a game this year, but he does not put the ball in harm's way very much. And he is an absolute primary, and he's also he's a big physical guy. He's not going to get hurt. He's going to bang in this game. And they have two backs they can rely on. And I remember you talking about Jadarian Price being so explosive. Then Jeremiah Love rips off a huge run, against Indiana, right? So, it's they do, I think they can have some explosiveness with their backs and some physicality with their quarterback. And I just don't think there's a version of the Georgia defense that I think a Notre Dame offense like this would have been in trouble, would have been in real trouble.
Yeah.
If you're just ramming into Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis all game, and it's what are you doing? What do you think is going to happen here? But I don't think it's quite like this. And again, even when you go back, again, the Georgia rushing defense, statistically, the two title years was awesome. It has not been as good the last couple of years. And of course, they've played some tough teams. We understand that. But I just think it's, at the very least, it's not elite. It's not the best in the country, which I don't know. Am I overestimating that I just don't want Northern fans who aren't watching Georgia every week to be oh no, coming into this game. I don't think it's no defense. It's good. It's good. Of course it's good, but it's not nearly as fearsome. 21. Are you kidding me? Nobody could do anything against that team.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm practically all the way there with you.
But you don't. I'm waving my saber.
There's a little bit of
okay. I get.
There's a little bit of let's see the beast get slain before we get too excited about it happening. I think for me, and I don't say this because you're anyone who thinks this Georgia team is the same as the Georgia teams that won national titles is woefully off base. But they still have enough talent. It's still it is. They still recruit like Georgia. It's not 1 through 11 NFL guys, but there's 6 NFL guys. There's some at every level on Georgia's defense, right? It's not something to be merely brushed aside. I'm also trying to remember. So that was the 2020 season, right, when Notre Dame played Alabama in the playoff, and Kyron Williams was nasty that year. Who was the quarterback? I might misremember.
Ian Book.
Ian Book, yeah. I guess it's he's not the same runner as Riley Leonard. Ian Book had 485 rushing yards that year. So this is not quite the same offense, but Notre Dame has always been a program that prides itself on its ability to run the ball on its offensive line, and then it just played an SEC team in the playoff game and couldn't do it. So I think this is a different mold of Notre Dame and different mold of SEC team. I'm all the way there with you, but I don't think I can project as much confidence as you are until I see it happen with my own two eyes.
So I have this sword is already blown up, but you're getting me so wound up that I'm blowing up my second sword. You have to pop the air bubble inside it to make it blow up. And now we'll watch this baby expand. This is expanding Notre Dame's confidence during the course of the game. You might start off Notre Dame and you're a little crinkly. You're not too sure. You got those memories, but by the end, you get those two backs going. And here's the thing. I think the offensive line will be okay. So we've talked a lot about Anthony Knapp, the left tackle, the true freshman. Statistically, I think he's given up more pressures than any tackle in the playoff, but he gave up a bunch in the beginning of the year when he was figuring it out. Yeah. And now he did give up 6 against Indiana, but also I don't know, Kyle Kamara is going to get you sometimes, and Notre Dame wasn't going to control that game. It's not like it blew up their off. So I think he'll be okay. And Emil Wagner's been really good. And so I think they'll have enough of a plan. And I am in on Jordan Faison. You're right. I think they can stretch the field just enough, but I really think they're going to be banging it with Riley Leonard. And I actually think once upon a time, this would have been exactly the wrong offense that you would want to have to go in against Georgia. I almost think it might be exactly the right offense you'd want to go against them now. And it's interesting. If Notre Dame doesn't get them, and what we think is going to happen in the Fiesta Bowl, then it's going to be Penn State, Georgia, and it's going to be the same thing. It's like, okay, there's not a lot happening on the outside. There's like a talented tight end. Certainly Penn State's is more, but this is an offensive line 2-back run game, and then they'd have to get Aller involved. Like I think like the North, if Georgia can advance, like the North's going to keep banging his head against this wall because I think they'll eventually punch through. And look at this.
Yeah, I think you're right. It looks like an inflatable dill pickle.
Oh, I thought you were going to say dill something else. Okay, thank you for saying pickle.
So I think you're right. Like we'll have the same conversation if it's Georgia Penn State, but Penn State's offensive line. I actually haven't looked this up. I should like look it up and average it. I would imagine that Penn State's offensive line is substantially larger than Notre Dame's. Which would
they were talking like Anthony Knapp came in at like 260 beginning of the year, is like at 295 now, but he's not 330.
Yeah, and I think Emil Wagner is like maybe 295 soaking wet. It's been a real struggle for him to get up to playing weight, and he's arguably still not there, but he's very athletic, so that makes up for it. So I think the Notre Dame offensive line is up for it too. But I guess I wonder about the size there, the size differential there with Georgia's defensive line, even if it's not a defensive line full of Jalen Carters, like they're still big, fast dudes. Like they're going to play in the NFL that like Notre Dame just doesn't see week to week. And I'm also curious about like Riley Leonard in this situation, because I remember back to that first Georgia Texas game. That's a good offensive line. That's a pretty veteran quarterback too in Quinn Ewers, and it really felt like Georgia just had their heads spinning with some of the ways they were deploying their front and some of the pressures they were throwing at Texas. If you run the ball well, maybe those things never come into play because you're not in obvious passing situations. But Texas couldn't run the ball, and then it got into those passing situations and then couldn't do anything, and Quinn Ewers also turned the ball over. I think you and I are probably in agreement that if any team playing Notre Dame turns it into a throw game for Notre Dame's probably going to lose. Because it's just not what they're built for. So I mean, it's an obvious thing to say, like they need to avoid that. You're there. I'm assuming you talked to him a little bit. The thing that jumped out to me, reflecting on the Notre Dame Indiana game, is that Jeremiah Love had a 98-yard touchdown run, and then he had 7 more carries for 10 total yards.
Yeah,
is he healthy? Is he like ready to go?
Yeah, I didn't actually talk to him about that. I was too busy talking to Joe Rudolph for 25 minutes. So I apologize. But yeah, I don't it didn't seem like to be a big discussion topic. I'll double check. I'll double check on it. So I do think there are times when you analyze a game and you realize a team has to do something more than itself to have a chance. That's not where I am for this side of the ball for Notre Dame. So I think that's a good starting point. All right, let's go to the other side of the ball. Georgia offense versus Notre Dame defense. I'm just theorizing here. Just let me ask right off just the Georgia offense mid.
I can definitely get there more quickly than with the defense, especially with Carson Beck out.
Yeah. Overall offensive ranking, EPA per play. 2021, when they were a defense-led team, they were 21st in the nation. Then in 2022, when Stetson Bennett was really the engine of that team, they were 9th in the nation. Last year, pretty good with Carson Beck. They were 5th. This year, they're 45th. They're 37th in EPA per rush. They're 36th in EPA per dropback. So they're just fine. And they miss Brock Bowers and Len McConkey. And this is a thing, again, just as a reminder for everybody, like when they won the second national title in 2022, Brock Bowers had 63 catches, Len McConkey had 58. Kenny McIntosh was awesome out of the backfield and had 42. That's not what this is this year. Dominic Levitt's their leading receiver. I think he's fine. If you were having a skill player draft, I don't think you'd be taking Georgia guys super high. And the thing is, Carson Beck, this is now where I've come on the Carson Beck Gunnar Stockton thing. Okay, so Carson Beck turned it over too much this year, right? But I actually think he was trying to make plays for them and feeling that when they don't have a lot of skill guys out there making plays on their own. So I think maybe he was trying to do too much. threw the ball downfield 20 yards or more 16.3% of the time, which is actually kind of a lot. It's more than Shadur Sanders throws it down the field. It's more than Kyle McCord throws it down the field. It actually kind of was still like a primary part of their passing game this year. And I don't think they're going to be able to do that with Gunnar Stockton. And I think that's how they get out of the phone booth, even if they don't have the world's greatest receivers. I think they still did that as part of their game plan. He's barely played. Gunnar Stockton is 0 for 4 on passes of 20 yards or more this year. Now, of course, I mean, they just were putting him in. They were just putting on cruise control in the second half against Texas and trying to survive. But I think it's a sort of a primary part of what they try to do, right? And I don't know if they'll be able to have that. And then all of a sudden now they're in the phone booth with backs that I think are good, but not great. And all of a sudden, I think Notre Dame can play in that phone booth with Georgia as well on that side of the ball. And so we'll talk more about the Notre Dame defense.
Doesn't scare you?
The interior
of, are you still talking about the Georgia offense? Yeah. So the interior of Georgia's offensive line against a Riley Mills-less Notre Dame defensive line.
So the thing is that, but they had been playing without Howard Cross for 3.5 games, and then Howard Cross came back, and now Riley Mills got hurt. So like they weren't at full strength anyway, and were finding ways to survive with some undersized guys, and I understand that, but they just have not been a full-throated defense the whole year. But like they basically traded Cross for Mills. So it stinks that Riley Mills is not playing, but they were playing shorthanded before anyway, and I get it. Tate Ratledge is good, right? I get it.
All three are good. Jarrett Wilson's very good. Dylan Fairchild's very good, and Tate Ratledge is very good. Like they're real center guard. They're for real.
Yeah. I think they were even talking about, Tate Ratledge was talking about this, that they're expecting Notre Dame to kind of just bring an extra guy down in the box because they can cover well enough on the outside with what we've talked about, Christian Gray and Leonard Moore's 2 young corners, Xavier Watts patrolling things. And I think they'll be able to put an extra hat in there and live on the outside because they're not afraid of that. And so, okay, I get it. But also, I think they can handle it. So, but Mills is a very big loss, and it's also possible that this is the one that puts you over the top. It's like, okay,
Mills is like yeah. Sorry, good.
No, just like they've survived the other ones. Now this is the one they can't survive because of who he is, how they're maybe not able to replace him, and how important he would be in a situation like this.
He's like just. I'm trying to find the heights and weights. Like I think Howard Cross is 288, right? Like. Riley Mills is like their only guy that's of some size they play on the inside, right?
Yeah.
That's just like I'm a little worried about them getting steamrolled. I'm a little worried about them getting steamrolled. And like I don't think Georgia's gonna come out and run for 400 yards and put up 40 points. I'm worried about like Georgia holding the ball and just like both teams want to run it. Obviously. But if Georgia is just like we don't even have to put the game in the hands of Gunnar Stockton because we're going to trust the interior of our offensive line. And the tackles are fine. The tackles are like Bonder Freeling's pretty good. The other tackle spot's not great, but they're just going to trust the interior of their offensive line with Trevor Etienne and Nate Frazier and bully Notre Dame in the middle of their defense that doesn't have it's arguably its best defensive lineman anymore with Riley Mills.
They've kind of chucked it around this year. Like that's not really like Carson Beck has like 6 games of at least 297 passing yards. Like they have been more of like, that's not, I don't know that that's been the focus of their identity so far. You're saying without Beck, you're playing a backup quarterback, take advantage of this. Notre Dame has an injury and is undersized and they just lean into that idea and try to win a game in the 20s.
Yes. Yeah.
Regardless of what they have or haven't been before, that they have the ability to do this now in this moment if they need to.
Yeah, but like it just brings in to focus more like someone like Xavier. I think Xavier Watts maybe more than anybody else. He was all over the place against Indiana. He is one of the best individual defensive players in the country. And like I've said before, like I was kind of out on him last year, but he's like showed me a lot with his versatility and not merely a pass defender. So if like he's going to drop down and he's going to help those guys and make sure that whoever's carrying the ball for Georgia is getting, 3 or 4 and not 8 or 12, then that's a recipe to win too. I just like it's whichever team shuts down the other's rushing attack is I think who's going to win the game. But with Riley Mills out, like I'm far more worried about Notre Dame's ability to do that than I would be otherwise.
How about Georgia averages 4.2 yards per carry, which is 79th in the nation?
I don't think it's not an overwhelmingly good rushing attack. Like nothing about Georgia's offense this entire season has felt dangerous, and that remains the case. It's worse off now. Carson, like whatever you think of Carson Beck, like if Georgia was ever going to find that level, it was going to be because Carson Beck turned into the guy that everyone thought was going to be a first round NFL draft pick. Just never really happened, or it happened like sporadically. I'm not suddenly thinking that's going to happen now with Gunnar Stockton, and nor am I suddenly thinking that they're going to turn into a team that, they're like a Michigan team that's just going to churn out 250 rushing yards, 300 rushing yards, like it's no problem. But I think the matchups matter. Like pulling Riley Mills out of the middle of a Notre Dame defensive line that has already been hit pretty hard by the injury bug and doesn't have a ton of depth, I think could be a problem. I'm not saying that it's definitely going to be, but I definitely think it could be.
Yeah. And it could be by necessity that it's like you're saying, like Georgia just leans into that because it's what they have left that they can do best. I think they'll be okay. I'd like several linebackers that Notre Dame plays, including some young guys. We like Watts a lot, and I think they can put 8 hats down there and say, we're not afraid of you throwing the ball. So,
I would just let Leonard Moore and Christian Gray like
live out there.
Islands. Yeah,
yeah,
right.
I think they're very capable of that. Yeah. No, I think they're very capable of that. So, yeah, I don't. It's been a weird year for Georgia, and again, like Kirby Smart, was just talking about the idea of. And he was espousing the let them lose theory of, for their 2 national championship runs, he said like they kind of expected to win every game. They were expected to win every game. They dominated a lot of teams and rolled. And then just the way the sport has changed and you lose some depth and it flattens out a little bit. And all of a sudden with the schedule they had, that wasn't the expectation. And he thought, they maybe won some games late in the year, and I think he's obviously speaking specifically about Georgia Tech and the SEC championship game because they lost earlier. They learned some lessons through some of the early losses, but it's just like the whole thing is just such a different it's a mortal Georgia. It's just such a whole different conversation because even last year there was an assumption with Georgia that they were going to roll through that schedule. It was easy early on, and then they won some games late, and then they got Saban'd late. But I think a lot of people thought if they had gotten in the 4-team playoff last year, they might have made it 3 straight. And so that like they just got tripped up by like the one guy who could trip them up. And that is just not at all. That is just not at all where they are right now on either side of the ball. And so don't be scared, North. Don't be scared.
No, I wouldn't be scared, and I don't think Notre Dame is. I mean, you would know better than me. You were down there around that, but I've nothing about this team. Yeah, nothing about this team. Observing them from afar has felt like they have that trait about them. I fully expect them to go to this game and to play confidently and feel good about some of the matchups too. It's like there are things that worry me about Georgia, and I'm expressing those concerns a lot. It's not because it's not that I think that and don't believe that Notre Dame doesn't have any edges anywhere. I think Notre Dame does. So I think it's going to be a really kind of tight, low scoring, competitive game.
Yeah, I like the low scoring too. I was going to go super low, and I had to pull myself up a little bit. Mm-hmm. So what do you got for your score?
My score is Notre Dame 24-20. Notre Dame is my national champ. Well, it's my national champ pick. I picked them to beat Oregon in the national championship. And I know I said that they would shut out Georgia when we did our bold prediction. So I'm not holding myself to that entirely.
Okay.
But
I brought that up to T-Shoe on the betting show because you helped me
Yeah.
take a team total under based on that.
I really think I think the pathway to a Georgia, I mean, I guess either team's pathway to a win could be pretty gross and low scoring, but I think Georgia winning, it's like they score 2 touchdowns and kick a field goal, and it's like 17-10, and Notre Dame just never get anything going offensively.
Yeah.
But I think Notre Dame will get something going. I would be reassured if I knew that Jeremiah Love was 100% healthy.
Okay.
He looked incredibly healthy on that 98-yard touchdown run, but I know that he was banged up a little bit coming into that game, and then to have the 7 for 10 yards beyond that 98-yard touchdown, did catch my eye a little bit. So with some more time I know they didn't have a month off before this one, but they've had a little bit of time to get ready for it. I'll assume he is a little fresher after only carrying the ball 8 times against Indiana. So you'll get a good version of him. Maybe he can pop an explosive run or two, but it's Riley Leonard's legs that I think will make the difference in this game for Notre Dame, whether that's him scrambling or I think designed runs have to be a part of it, and they will be a part of it. And Notre Dame will win 24-20.
So can I give you something that another reporter here dropped as an idea that I was like, okay, great. Thanks for putting that in my head. Gunnar Stockton has a little bit of a rough start, and Georgia puts in Jaden Rashada, and he's like, I'm ready for this.
Oh, is that what the plan would be?
I don't know. It's just like figure out what do you have, and I guess he'd be next. It's either him or a true freshman, right? So, I don't know. You into that at all?
No, but now you're making me wonder if is Jaden Rashada a little mobile? Like, is there going to be a Jaden Rashada run package for?
I mean, like now we're
Georgia in this game, like they did with Justin Fields when he was a freshman.
Yeah, now we're just like creating scenarios of like, because here's the thing too. I certainly think this might be the worst Georgia team that you see in a while, and on behalf of the North, you better get them now, right?
That's true. Yeah.
Like if you can't beat this Georgia, because before Saban got him and kept them out, it was like, what's happened? Like the only person who's got him is Saban. So now he's gone, and now the North is going to have to take care of this themselves, because the 12-team playoff, they're always going to be in here. But even though they're the 2 seed, they're about as vulnerable as you're ever going to see. So I mean, that's if this happens, now you're doing this to me. Like that's this is going to be a gigantic failure by the North if they can't beat Georgia now. Doesn't necessarily. I mean, if it's not in this game, it better be the next game. If it's not that game, it better be the next game, because this is a vulnerable team with and that was even before their starting quarterback got injured, and they're putting in a guy who's basically never played before. But for real, like you can't beat this version of them. Good luck preventing Georgia from winning 7 of the next 10.
This version of Georgia winning the national title would be quite detrimental to the brand.
My God,
and the agenda.
I would just be using blow up swords all the time now. I'd have to throw away the other ones. Yeah. I've had to go to the parade in my hat. Maybe I just flip. Maybe you just be like, that's it. KOTS. Sorry, Landis. You want to do this with me or not? It's going to be the 14th Southern-based college football show. KOTS. How about those dogs? Dog mentality.
Have you been asking folks down there who they think's going to win? Do you have any kind of vibe on what people are expecting?
Yeah, I mean, it's as much as I sort of felt like there's nothing like Notre Dame feels like they can go toe to toe with these guys. One Notre Dame guy was like, did you see those Georgia guys? And I was like, yes, I saw. But like, also, did you see the Georgia Tech game? Did you see the Kentucky game? Did you see the UMass game? Did you see the losses to Alabama and Ole Miss? Like, did you see all the things that those guys, those giant, great talents have not been steamrolling people this year? So like, we can't just look at a bunch of guys sitting around a banquet room table and be like, that's it. Game over.
Yeah,
like,
I mean that's the spell.
Scared.
Yeah, that's the spell that SEC teams cast over Northern beat writers when bowl season comes around.
I know.
Like, well, these guys are huge,
right?
So they play the same sport. Yeah.
So like, I'm not I'm not buying it. But like again, this is the time to do it. So okay, so we're both picking the Fighting Irish. I'm not surprised. Pretty low scoring. I have 23-13, and I was dancing with like 20-9. You know, like I was really. And we talked about it with T-Shoe. Like I think there's some underplays that you can make here on team totals and the overall total, and a couple different things here. If you have like a theory of how you think this game is going to go, and I think you and I have obviously very similar theory here. So
yeah, I'm sure there is a way that it could get loose, but I think the percentage chances of that happening are quite low. I don't even know what the total is. I think I bet an under as soon as Notre Dame won and we knew they were playing each other. Might have been like 45.5 or something like that. So it just doesn't. It feels like either team would be quite content playing ball possession here.
yeah,
And both are going to run it a lot. I don't think there's going to be a lot of back and forth trading possessions in this game.
yeah, 46 latest total as I look at it now.
Yeah.
So, all right, that will wrap up the big game breakdown. We'll be back after this on Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises back on Kings of the North. You can't let Landis get going on big guards. God, he just gets enamored. Oh, those big guards at Georgia. And I apologize. Whisper Doug. Whisper Doug is like, Georgia might win 7 of the next 10. They're not going to win 7 of the next 10. What am I doing? I lost my mind. I am not. Are you a yelling show? No, we're not a yelling show. We've answered that question once and for all. Yes, we're a yelling show. Notre Dame's offensive line, I think, is fine. I don't, they're not as big. I checked the numbers because Landis was talking about Penn State. Penn State has a couple giant guards. Sal Wormley and especially Vengaone is huge at Penn State. He's 6'4", 348. And then Nolan Ritchie, the guy they put in at right tackle at Penn State when Anthony Donko got hurt, is 6'8". So, okay. The interior of the Notre Dame offensive line is fine. 310, 310, 325. 6'5", 6'5", 6'5". Pat Coogan in the middle. Rocco Spindler and Billy Schrauth. Like, they're fine. They're absolutely big enough. The tackles are both under 300. Anthony Knapp and Emil Wagner. But actually, like, Georgia's a little more of a speed rush team. There are two guys with the most pressures this year. Jalen Walker, who, again, is maybe the best defensive player in the country. He's 6'2", 245. He's a speed guy. That's where he does a lot of his damage. And then Michael Williams is really good. He's 6'5", 265, and Damon Wilson's the other guy who gets pressure. He's 6'4", 250. So it's not a sledgehammer defense, by the way. I mean, we know what we're doing here. Georgia has 3 defensive players who are projected to go in the first round of this draft. Michael Williams and Jalen Walker as edge guys, and Malachi Starks as a safety. So, like, as a defensive backfield guy. So, like, we get it. I get it, right? But I'm just saying it's not 11. It's not 11. I would say they really have 3 individual standout guys. I think they're vulnerable. I just think they're vulnerable at some of the corner spots. I think they're vulnerable more at defensive tackle than they've been traditionally. And I really think Starks is really the only guy in the secondary that scares you. And I think there have been times when there actually have been times sometimes when we were saying, like, you've got to throw on Georgia to win. You can't go through them. You got to go over them. Then it was like, okay, well, because maybe the secondary was the weakness. I'm just comparing. This is all, when you have great teams, the best comparison for any great team is itself. We do it all the time with Ohio State. It's what you do with Georgia, because we have a picture in our head. Compared to itself, it's not as good. That's what we're saying. And I absolutely think we could look back in time. We're in this moment being like, and then a couple of years from now, when you ask Kirby Smart about this, he's like, man, we had a backup quarterback playing in that game. And it's just like, hey, what happened that year? It's like we had a tough schedule. We had a backup quarterback. It kind of got away from us. Our defense wasn't as good as usual. And like, hey, that's the dip year for Georgia. And when it's wedged in between a great run of success, it's like, hey, it's the dip year. I think we're in the dip year. So let's acknowledge the dip while we're in it. We're in a dip. Let's not pretend. That's all. We're in a dip. Notre Dame's going to win. 2 p.m. Eastern. We'll see you back here. It's a lot to ask. but we ask a ton of you guys all the time. We ask so much of you. It is homework being part of this audience. So now we have more homework. Okay. Got a couple Northern Bowl games to watch today. And I'm just telling you, right? Save some hate for the South. Michigan, Alabama, ReliaQuest Bowl, noon Eastern, right? Right around the corner, banger. Louisville, Washington, and the Tony. I don't have to say that. I saw a story that somebody wrote where they put the sponsor of the bowl name in the story. It's like, are they paying you? You don't have to put the sponsor's name. It's just the Rose Bowl. It's not the sponsor's name, Rose Bowl. Sun Bowl. I'm not saying the other part. Louisville, Washington. Hey, good luck to Jed Fish and the Huskies. Cheez-It. I said Cheez-It. Well, it's because we like Cheez-Its. Citrus Bowl. And we also like citrus. So there's a breakfast buffet here. Usually when I eat a breakfast buffet, I just pound bacon. I've really been trying to make myself eat honeydew for the new year. So we can talk about where you guys are on honeydew, but you have to eat the fruit on the breakfast buffet. You have to eat the fruit. South Carolina, Illinois, 3 Eastern. Is it 4 Eastern? I don't know. I'm on Central Time and it's throwing me off. It's this afternoon. I think it's a really good game. Because like South Carolina wants to be the team that everyone's like, oh, why did they get in? Nobody said that about Illinois. I think that's a pretty even matchup. And I'm actually really eager to see how Illinois hangs in that game. And then there's another game later that's 2 Southern teams we don't care about. So we'll see you at 2 Eastern for the Rose Bowl preview. We'll see you tonight for post-game Boise State, Penn State. We'll see you tomorrow post-game of the Sugar Bowl late at night. But we're going to have a huge show to talk about what may be the greatest day in college football history. So thanks you guys for being part of it. Northern college football has risen up and we're excited to celebrate that. We'll see you at 2 Eastern. Landis will join us live from Los Angeles to talk about the Rose Bowl. We'll make our picks there. For now, thanks as always to our producer, Mike Yarostowski, for making us look good and sound good. Thanks to Pete Samson, really knows his stuff about Notre Dame. You find him on The Athletic. You find him on his podcast. They do a great job there. So thanks to Pete for joining us. But most of all, thanks to you guys for being part of it. 3-show day. We'll see you soon. For now, I'm Doug Lesmerises on Kings of the North.